Thank you, Mr Speaker. I think I've demonstrated how quickly I would like to get through this already. At the outset, I should advise members that a number of the amendments that we will debate today arise from recommendations made by the Environment Committee. I want to express my appreciation for the work carried out by committee members and for the timely manner of their consideration of this bill. The collective effect of this group of amendments, together with the removal of Clause 3, is to remove what is known as the statutory option from drink driving legislation. At the outset, Mr Speaker, it may be useful if I explain what the statutory option is. Currently, a driver whose breath alcohol reading is over the legal limit will normally be arrested and subjected to an evidential breath test. If the evidential reading is marginally above the legal limit, the law allows the driver to opt for a blood or urine specimen to replace the breath specimen. The bill, as introduced to the Assembly, retained this statutory option and applied it to the new, lower drink driving limits that are proposed in this bill. However, the retention of the statutory option reflected a lack of clarity prior to the introduction of the bill around whether removal would be compliant with Article 6 of the European Convention of Human Rights, the right to a fair trial. With that in mind, my predecessor decided that the position should be kept under review during the bill's legislative passage. Such review could also take into account any legal concerns that might arise during the passage of similar legislation in Westminster. The GB legislation, the Deregulation Act, is now in place, and the statutory option was removed from law in April 2015. No human rights concerns were raised. This leaves us as the only jurisdiction among all EU member states and all signatories to the Convention to retain such an option. So why do we need to remove the statutory option? Well, there are at least three key reasons. Firstly, the reliability of modern breath testing equipment. When breath testing was first introduced, the equipment wasn't as reliable as it is now. The alternative of a blood or urine test is therefore no longer necessary. Secondly, the time delay in getting a doctor to come out to a police station to take a blood or urine sample means that the blood alcohol levels are likely to reduce in the interim. This could mean that drivers who were over the limit at the time that they were stopped end up evading prosecution. This will become more pertinent if we apply the statutory option to the new lower limit. Thirdly, the continued operation of the statutory option could force the PSNI, in some circumstances, to have to close down checkpoints in order to take the driver to a police station where the blood or urine test can be carried out. Mr Principal Deputy Speaker, I firmly believe that the statutory option should be removed from drink driving legislation. In reaching this decision, I have commissioned further legal opinion that suggests removal of the statutory option is compliant with the European Convention on Human Rights. I have listened also to the Environment Committee, which, having considered all the evidence before it, has recommended that the continued provision of the statutory option as set out in Clause 3 of the bill should be removed. Again, Mr Principal Deputy Speaker, I thank the committee for its detailed scrutiny. In proposing the removal of the statutory option, I am not weakening the protections against marginal error in the operation of breath testing equipment. There are a number of safeguards built into the process of obtaining evidence that are designed to ensure that only those drivers undoubtedly over the limit are brought forward for prosecution in court. These safeguards include a prosecution threshold which is applied by the PSNI. This currently means that the driver will not be prosecuted unless the lower of two breath samples contains at least 40 micrograms of alcohol, this despite the prescribed limit being 35 micrograms. The PSNI will continue to apply an equivalent prosecution threshold at the new limits. The rigorous testing of breath testing equipment as part of the type approval process. Indeed, as I have mentioned already, The technology used in modern breath testing equipment is advanced, and it is very uncommon for its reliability to be legally challenged. And the laboratory margin of error that is built into the blood or urine testing process, which is also reflected in the breath limits. This margin of error is designed to safeguard the driver who, for health reasons, has had to provide a specimen of blood or urine for analysis against any imprecision in testing machinery. Indeed, the statutory option has never been available to such drivers. To finish on this issue, in light of all of these factors, clear legal opinion, the strong support of the Environment Committee, other safeguards that remain in place, its recent removal from legislation in Britain, and the fact that no other jurisdiction in the EU has equivalent provision, I now propose to remove the statutory option from legislation here. Certainly.
To explore with the Minister the point that he tells us that the police will have a practice of not prosecuting a reading below 40, even though the statutory provision is 35. Is the Minister emphatically saying to this House that in no circumstances will there be a prosecution of a reading below 40? Is that what he's saying to the House?
Thank you, Mr. Principal Deputy Speaker, and I thank Mr. Allister for his intervention. The member will be aware that I personally am not in a position to give that categorical assurance. I have outlined the current practice of the PSNI, and I can assure the member and indeed the House that the PSNI have given assurance to myself and I believe to the committee that that practice will continue. I should also, in passing, mention two of the other amendments in this group. Amendment 1 is simply a technical drafting amendment which I am making on the advice of the Office of Legislative Counsel. Its only objective is to ensure consistency with drafting elsewhere in the bill. Amendment 29 is a technical amendment to remove a transitional provision in the bill. The provision is no longer required following the commencement of sections 22 and 23 of the Taxis NI Act 2008. These are the amendments in Group 1.
Call the chairperson of the